Folks who don't own EVs and may never own an EV are paying higher power bills to provide a service that they're never going to use.
What's going on, YouTube family? Braxton Critcher with you on Automotive Repair News today. Thanks for checking out this video, and I want to hear from you throughout this conversation, because if you're in the automotive industry, in a repair shop, in the automotive field in general, at a dealership, what have you, EVs are a topic of everybody's conversation because, it's a big deal, right? With all the legislation happening right now in the US, within 15 years, we're realistically talking about every new vehicle to hit the market being a hybrid or EV in some form. So EVs, big deal. And EV charging is almost right now a bigger deal, especially in about 15 states, including Florida, that we're going to focus on today, because funding has been approved, funding has been granted, but charging stations have not really increased in Florida and 15 other states around the United States. That's why we're having this conversation. And if you have things to add to this, please hit me up in the comments below. I want to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, you should do so. You'll get updates for content just like this, so you can keep informed on what's happening around the industry. Also, if you have not subscribed to the podcast channel, you can do that as well on your favorite podcast platform. Just search for Automotive Repair News today. Well, Ryan McKinnon is here, and we're going to talk about this. So, Ryan, I think first, let's talk about just perspective. What's your perspective on where we stand today, here right now in July 2024, on EVs and EV charging, especially in Florida?
Sure. Thanks, Braxton. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
EVs are in the news constantly these days, and they've sort of become one of those things that I don't want to say they've been politicized, but there's folks who are pushing for an all EV future. There's folks who are very resistant to that. Where our organization comes in, and I'm with Charge Ahead Partnership, we're a coalition of gas stations and truck stops and convenience stores that want to get into the EV charging business, is we're looking at it really from the business side of things. We're saying, all right, these EVs are coming. Whether you like them or not, whether you think it's great, whether you don't like them, there's going to be more EVs on the road in 10 years than there are today. And so our members really want to be able to serve those drivers and to offer EV charging, because, as you know, that's probably the biggest hurdle to more widespread EV adoption in America today, is just the fact that our EV charging infrastructure is so lacking.
Yeah.
Most people that have an EV, unless you live in a really urban area that has a lot of EV charging stations, most people wouldn't feel super confident about taking a long road trip in their EV, because they'd be too concerned that they're going to get stranded on the side of the road with a dead battery.
Right.
And up until this point, it's really been the early adopters who have driven EV adoption in a lot of places, folks who are willing, when they're going to take a road trip, to map out the crazy circuitous route they have to take in order to hit all the EV charging stations along the way. But for me, for most people, I don't want to do that. I would only get an EV if I was pretty confident that I could go long distances and be able to have plenty of places to charge up.
Right.
And so, to sort of answer your question, where we are in July 2024, a lot of excitement about EVs, a lot of hype, but not enough EV charging stations for all that excitement and hype to really become reality.
Yeah. So I was actually just in Florida like a week ago, and I could tell that there were a lot of EVs on the roads. And Florida statistically is the most populous EV state in the country. And I can confirm that there were a lot of EVs in Florida. And I tried to sort of notice as we drove through rest stops and gas stations, how many charging stations there were. And there are two Buc-ee's on the route that we took on Interstate 95, and there were some EV charging stations there, but not a ton. They weren't full. There were some using, but they weren't full. But honestly, I didn't notice a ton. I really didn't. I mean, there aren't a lot of charging stations. So with the funding that has been approved, what is your opinion as to what's the holdup? Why are states like Florida being a little reluctant to put in more charging stations?
Sure. So the program that you're referring to, it's often called the Nevi program. It stands for National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And what that was back in 2021, as part of the Bipartisan Jobs Act, Congress allocated $5 billion to divvy up amongst all 50 states for each state to give out sort of as grants. It doesn't have to be a grant specifically, but to distribute to folks throughout the state who are going to install, own, and operate EV charging stations throughout the state. The idea behind it really is to serve folks who are going long distances, because to your experience in Florida, a lot of people in Florida who have EVs probably charge at home or at work also.
Right.
So if you have an EV, you can drive to work, drive home, plug it in when you get home. It's fully charged up the next day. You're ready to go. But the Nevi program is trying to serve a whole different bucket of customers, and that's folks who can't charge up at home, either because they don't have a charger or because they're on a long road trip. And so Florida is one of, every state got a big bucket of money to use in order to help build out charging stations. But Florida is one of a handful that has kind of just sat on the money and hasn't distributed it yet. We've seen states like Ohio and New York, which are very different politically. One's very red, one's very blue. Both of them have operational NEVI-funded charging stations already up and running, and a bunch of other states across the political spectrum are not very far behind. So it really is a mystery why a state like Florida would sit on the sidelines and not use this money, because the money is really intended kind of to be seed money for businesses. It's not to build government-owned charging stations that are going to just pop up on the side of the road, but instead it's for folks like a Buc-ee's or a Wawa or Tesla or anyone else who wants to provide EV charging to apply for a grant to help offset the cost of the charger. Because for a lot of businesses, that upfront cost of buying and installing a charger is the most prohibitive part of offering EV charging. And so you might own a gas station right off the interstate and say, you know what, I'm seeing lots of EVs, just like you were in Florida. And you're probably thinking like, oh, well, I'd like to be able to serve these drivers, but in order to do that, I'm going to have to spend maybe $200,000, $300,000 right off the bat. That's going to take a long time to recoup all that. And who knows if and when I'll make all that back. So a lot of folks are hesitant.
Yeah.
So the NEVI program is designed to help sort of offset that hesitancy and give businesses the confidence that they can get some help with the startup cash necessary in order to offer the service.
So this isn't something from the top down in Florida. It's almost from the under, like the bottom up. So
sort of, yeah.
Small businesses aren't taking advantage of it.
Well, small businesses want to, but the state has not made the grants available. So yeah, small businesses very much want to get into this.
And this has been, in 2 years, in 3 years.
Yeah. Their plan was approved in the fall of 2022. And your viewers might have seen there's been a bunch of news stories all about how the president allocated billions of dollars to EV charging stations, and so far there's only 7 been built. And that's true, but sort of the real culprit behind that is that states like Florida are slowing down the process so much, when really this is a pro-business program that is designed to sort of stimulate the economy by rewarding those who are willing to invest themselves.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of leadership in Florida, pros and cons to withholding the funding. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of pros in withholding funding. Do you have any ideas to why? Have you done research or asked around? Or, it just seems to sort of perplex me.
Part of this is just bureaucracy and moving really slowly. It took the federal government time to develop the criteria that states needed to put into their plans. And then it took time for those plans to be approved. And then once the plan was approved, the state had to jump through all these hoops. So part of it is just bureaucracy,
Yeah.
which is inevitable with any government program. But to your point, it's a state that has a ton of EVs and that would benefit from more businesses building, owning, and operating charging stations. And so there's not a lot of good reason for it to take going on 2 years to make this money available.
So I covered a story recently about Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is one of, seems like 15-ish states again that are beginning to charge EV drivers, or will be soon, a fee yearly for owning and operating an EV to offset cost to keep up with road conditions. And that's smart. Do you think that Florida might be dragging their feet on something like this because they're trying to delay the inevitable? We're going to have to come up with, if we're going to give people the option to charge more of their electric cars, then we're going to lose tax dollars, or we're going to lose, tax dollars from gas. And so they're having to just try and push this off a little bit. Could that be part of it?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't
No?
want to speculate because I honestly don't know why it's taking
Yeah.
so long. But
Well,
just in terms of that theory, it's easier to pass a law down the road like Pennsylvania did to recoup that lost gas tax revenue than it is to try to jam up the wheels of progress by preventing EV adoption in your
so
state.
you think it's going to happen. It's just
Yeah, it's
taking
gonna.
longer.
Yeah,
Okay. What about electric utilities? You brought that up to me a few minutes ago. Explain what that kind of tax is that's happening in Florida.
sure. And it's Florida, it's Minnesota, it's Colorado. This is happening all over the country.
Okay.
And so your viewers know, kind of this is the big issue. The Nevi thing that we were just talking about, that's kind of a temporary blip on the radar. That's something that we're advocating to get fixed. But the big challenge for businesses that want to offer EV charging is that in a lot of states, they're being forced to compete with the power company. And so what the power company is doing, and like I said, this is happening all over the place, is the power company is raising your power bill, your home electricity power bill, in order to offset the cost for them to build, own, and operate their own power company branded EV charging stations. So Georgia Power, for example, is doing this for a long time, where Georgia Power, there was their customers paid a higher rate, and a portion of that money would go to help Georgia Power pay for its own EV charging program. And same thing in Minnesota, Colorado, California, New Mexico, all over the place this is going on, Florida. And what happens when power companies do this is, first of all, folks who don't own EVs and may never own an EV are paying higher power bills to provide a service that they're never going to use. So that might not be a big deal to you or me, or maybe some folks. But if you're on a fixed income, or if you're elderly, or if your power bill is, you're paying close attention to it every month, you're probably not excited to be paying more so that someone who can afford an EV, which is expensive, can get a more convenient charge.
Yeah.
That's the first thing, is that it really hurts consumers. It's not a fair or equitable way for the power companies to be doing this. The second thing it does is it does the exact opposite of what the power companies say it's going to do. They'll often bring these proposals forward saying, up in Minnesota last year, Xcel Energy brought forth a proposal to spend $200 million to build hundreds of charging stations all throughout Minneapolis and St. Paul. And their big pitch was, hey, there's not enough EV charging stations. We're going to be the ones that do it. You're going to get tons of EV charging stations if you allow us to raise rates by these hundreds of millions of dollars. What typically ends up happening in those states is that all the private businesses that would offer EV charging, that were willing to use their own money to get into this business, say, okay, well, I can't compete with the power company who has captive ratepayers who are bankrolling their entire operation. And so those private companies end up taking their businesses to other states that don't have the power company doing it.
Yeah.
There's a gas station owner in Minnesota who he's a member of our coalition, and he's been offering EV charging at his gas station for over 10 years. So he was a super early adopter with all this, and he saw the opportunity 10 years ago that more and more people were going to be getting EVs, and he wanted to kind of brand himself as the EV charging spot in town. And his biggest concern when his own power company announced they were going to raise rates by $200 million in order to build all these charging stations is this is brand new competition that isn't subject to all the same rules of supply and demand and all the economic factors that a private business is.
Mm-hmm.
Because a power company can raise rates, install a charger, maybe the charger's in a bad spot, maybe nobody ever uses it, maybe it breaks after 6 months and just sits there broken. None of that impacts the power company's bottom line because they've used ratepayer money to build it and they've recouped a return on investment from it already that's built into their rate structure. Mm-hmm. And so it's the incentive structure when power companies do this is kind of flipped on its head, whereas a private business is incentivized to put the charger in the most convenient location, to offer the best service, to make sure the charger is operational, to make sure there's someone there to help you with it, to have coffee and snacks and drinks and food and all the things people expect when they gas up. That's all in the interest of a private business doing this, but that doesn't exist with the power companies.
What's your recommendation for, what you think is going to happen next, but also how you feel would be best for EVs as a whole?
Really the best thing, just think back to the development, and this was all before we were born, but when gas stations were first invented, it happened because more and more people were buying automobiles. People were traveling to areas that didn't have gas stations. So there became demand. There became if you lived in a rural part of Kansas, they build, a road going through your property, your cornfield. All of a sudden you got drivers traveling down it and you have an opportunity to sell them gas to make some money and to take advantage of this new emerging technology. That's how gas stations developed and evolved. It wasn't through some massive orchestrated program, either by the government or by the gas companies or by anyone else. Instead, it was lots of different private businesses seeing opportunity and taking advantage of that and being, entrepreneurial and looking for the best way to serve drivers. And that sort of tradition is probably why gas stations have become what they've become, where they've become these sort of one-stop shops for travelers, places that have all the, clean bathrooms, food to eat, plenty to drink, plenty to do. They've adapted to customer demand over the years. And so really that should be the model for EV charging. We shouldn't try to force ratepayers. We shouldn't allow power companies to predict where they think EV charging stations should go and then use someone else's money to do it. And then if they fail, oh, well, sorry. That's not a good way to do it. That's not going to inspire trust in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Instead, sort of our policy recommendation is to pass laws that prohibit utilities from using your money to build, own, and operate their own charging stations. And that's not because utilities are bad or we're anti-utility. That's because utilities are essential for generating the electricity that's necessary to power these vehicles. That's a huge task that they have before them, and they kind of need to stay in their lane and focus on that. Rather than getting into the business of building EV charging stations and selling power, what the utility needs to do is generate and distribute the electricity and then allow the retailers and the entrepreneurs and the innovators to figure out the best way to get that power into your car. And so it's a much less sort of like top-down approach and more of a organic approach meeting the supply and demand.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that because so much of what you hear about EV is legislation. It's from government, stateside and U.S., but I think that's right. I mean, that's how America's economy has always grown through any sort of infrastructure was entrepreneurs, small businesses, things like that. That's right. I think that's a great perspective. I think it's great. What can someone watching this or listening to the podcast do to join what you guys are doing? Tell me more about what what the foundation and the partnership is doing and what somebody else can do to learn more or help out?
Sure. So Charge Ahead Partnership, it's a coalition of folks who want to see a fair and level playing field in the EV charging marketplace. So it's important to note our coalition is completely made up of competitors. It's gas stations that are competing with other gas stations, convenience stores, truck stops, grocery stores, restaurants. They've all sort of been forged in the fire of free market competition, and they're not necessarily best buddies with each other, but they have a common cause of they want to be able to offer this service to drivers without having to compete against a power company. And so that's kind of who our coalition is. In some cases it's private businesses, other cases it's organizations. We have some consumer advocacy folks who are involved because of what I was saying earlier about the unfairness of asking someone on a fixed income or really anyone to pay for a service that they're never going to use. And then we also just have individuals who believe in the free marketplace, who believe in fair competition. And so if any of your viewers are interested in that, check out our website. We're chargeaheadpartnership.com. We're all about raising awareness of this issue and helping folks understand that the EV revolution, if you want to call it that, it's not something that necessarily should be politicized.
Yeah.
It's something that it's an emerging technology that is going to evolve and is only going to get better, most likely in the coming years. And there's a lot of businesses that want to take advantage of this opportunity and serve drivers. And so if anyone's interested in that, definitely check us out. It's free to join. It's an advocacy organization. So lending your voice to it just makes our argument more effective and resonate with more folks. So we'd be happy to have anybody.
Again, that's chargeaheadpartnership.com. There'll be a link to the site in the description of this video and the podcast show notes as well. If you'd like to learn more, you can click on that link there beneath the video or the audio. Hey, Ryan, thanks.
Braxton, thanks. I really appreciate having me on.
Yeah. Again, I want to hear your perspective because Ryan's thoughts are really out of the box for me. I had not thought about small businesses, entrepreneurs starting up EV charging stations where they are, where it makes sense for their community, their town, their interstate. And so if you've had that idea or have other things to add to that, that's what this video, that's what this podcast is for, to start conversations to help change the industry, the automotive industry, and automotive repair. So hit me up in the comments. Also, share the video with people that you think would like to view the content, listen to the episode as well, because that helps more people get to know what's happening in the industry just like this. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast or the YouTube channel, do that now. And we appreciate you listening and watching Automotive Repair News Today.